welcome to today's panel discussion, How to Create Relationships While Exploring the World. My name is Sarah Buckliew, lead teacher for world languages at River Bluff High School in Lexington, South Carolina. Hopefully you've had a chance to watch our on-demand session, Creating Relationships While Exploring the World, in which our students and former students shared their experiences of creating international relationships, expanding their global perspectives, and growing personally by engaging in the target language. Today, I have the honor of presenting the incredible educators who made these learning opportunities a reality, so that you can ask them questions about how to provide real-world and life-changing experiences for your own students. So without further ado, let's meet our panelists for today.
Hi, I'm Sarah Buckliew, and I am the German teacher here at River Bluff High School. I teach German 1 through AP, and I am part of the panel because a lot of my students talked about their experiences with our German program here. I am the South Carolina American Association of Teachers of German president for our state, and I am a German coach as well, so I help give support for German teachers on best protocols and practices. And I'm also the German-American Partnership Program coordinator, as well as the German-American Virtual Exchange coordinator. So I'm excited to talk to y'all about all of these exciting opportunities. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Shawn. I'm teaching French at River Bluff High School. I'm here today because I would like to share with you my experience of school exchange program with a French high school.
Rebecca, if you could unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm Rebecca, the Chinese teacher in River Bluff High School. I teach Chinese from level 1 to AP. Today, I wanted to share with teachers and students my thoughts and experiences from involving my students in extracurricular activities to help them develop their language skills, intercultural communication ability, by making friends with target language countries. We have a partnership school in China, and also the local field trips, Chinese clubs, the experiences they have.
Hello. I'm Mona Pes. I'm one of the French teachers here at River Bluff High School, and I teach level 3 partial immersion and French AP as well. I'm here because I took part to 2 different programs. One was the exchange program, and the other one was the study abroad program. And I'm excited to share some of the stuff that I've learned along the way.
Hey, my name is Lisette Geib. I teach Spanish 3, 4, and 5 here at River Bluff High School in Lexington. And I helped design the curriculum and help lead the Spain and France trip. And I've been taking students to Spain for over 17 years on the study abroad program, which is a 3-week immersion program. And I'm really here to talk about how to maintain the language when students return, how to use reflection as a tool to improve their proficiency while they're in the study abroad program, and how to align maybe the curriculum with study abroad programs overseas with the curriculum here in the US.
Thank you all. We're so excited to have you. So we have a few questions to get the conversation started, but audience, we really want to hear from you. So please type in your questions to whatever platform you're using. We can see your comments and address those at any time during our presentation today. So please don't hesitate to type in those questions. So to get started, when our students were sharing, we heard the students describe both international and domestic exchanges. So let's start by addressing the international ones, where we physically had an exchange, whether our students went abroad or we hosted international students here. So my first question, because as you can imagine, there's so many things to think about when planning such a extensive exchange, where do you start? What is your recommendation? What's the first step for planning an international exchange for someone who's interested in that?
I'll go ahead and start. So the first thing I would recommend is find people that have done exchanges before and pick their brains and then do what works for you. Especially in the German teacher community, whether you go through an organization like GAP, the German American Partnership Program, or currently the German American Virtual Exchange Program, pick everyone's brains, find out as much as you can about the different programs, and then tweak it to make it work for you and your school and your students. You can get so much valuable information, learn from other people's mistakes. Instead of learning from your own mistakes, learn from other people's mistakes, and steal as much as you can, just like you do with teaching. Take from others and make it your own and own it, and then communicate. I can't stress how important it is to communicate, not only with your students and the parents, but also with administration. To get administration support is key. And once administration is on board, you can really do so much for your students and open so many doors.
Okay.
You also need to know what fits the best for your student, for your school. There are so many options about different programs. Here at River Bluff, we have immersion students. So for us, being an exchange student or having an exchange between schools is the best. So this is very important to know actually what fits the best for you, for your school, for your students.
And I will add that it's really important to start early. If you're trying to do a trip, I would recommend that you start more than a year before you actually end up doing the trip, because there's so much that goes into the planning and recruiting students and getting in touch with the school. And you need to figure out also what you want. Like start with the end in mind. Like what is it that you want students to do there? Do you want them to just go and explore the country, the target country, or do you want them to also go and take classes? You need to start with the end in mind and then go back now and plan how you want that to happen. The other thing that I will add is it's really important to, like my colleague just said, to talk to other people that have done this before. We learned, like when we did the exchange program here and the study abroad here, we learned so much along the way. It would have been so much better to have talked to people who did it before. So it's really important. Like I can't stress this enough. It's really important to talk to other people that have done it. If you don't have anyone in your school, get in touch with other people who have done it in other schools.
Thank you, Lisette or Rebecca. Would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is the backup planning. Very important to match from like our school to, like, for example, my partner school, what they have and what you want. So they will, like we collaborated a lot with the Chinese partner school so that they know what we really want and design a short immersion period for us. So that is very important.
The only thing I think I didn't hear mention is if you can participate in the program prior to taking the students, visit the sites. A lot of these programs will actually pay for you to go and visit and experience the school or the program. That will give you, especially if you're not familiar with the city or the town or the geography of the location, I think that's really vital. And then obviously, if you're going to do a study abroad, really knowing where the children or the students will be living or staying and what those accommodations look like.
Thank you all. That's very good advice. So you guys mentioned how it's so important to connect with others who have done this before and to share your experiences. So thank you for doing that now. And I'd love to hear from each of you. What do you know now that you wish you had known when you started?
Okay, there's a lot. Every year it gets better and better, but every year the world also changes completely. So you have to remember to be flexible, and I think that's key. Sometimes if you've done exchanges for multiple years, a mistake would be not being flexible. You have to be flexible. And then the other mistake is we concentrate so much on our side of the exchange, on making sure that our students are okay and that our parents who are hosting students are okay and that our administration and teachers are on board. There are sometimes when we forget when exchange students come to us, we need to be very clear with our expectations for them. So sometimes the mistakes are made on our partner's end, and it's mainly a cultural thing. And sometimes we just forget. We're so busy taking care of our own students and making sure that they have the best experience ever, that sometimes we forget we also need to be very clear on our expectations for our partner side. So that communication with you need somebody who you can trust, who you can be completely open with and honest with, and not be afraid to have strong cultural conversations about what our expectations are. So it's really important to make sure that you have a great relationship with your partner teacher or your partner school. Those communications, that's probably where the biggest mistakes can be made. And the mistakes can be easily that way.
Yes. So to add to what Sarah said, it's very important to be flexible and very communicative with the partner school for the expectation for the student of both sides, because we have our River Bluff norms, but they also have their different norms at their school. And whenever they're here or there, but together, they must have something related to everybody. So it's really important to talk a lot with the other school, the partner school, to fix an expectation for all students.
One thing that I will add to that is, if you are taking, first of all, remember that this is going to be like having a second job. There's so much that goes into getting this together. I was never like at the forefront. I always just helped, but even that is gruesome. So remember, this is going to be time consuming. So if you can delegate as much as you can. And then the other thing that I will add is, if you're taking students abroad, be intentional about teaching them what the culture shock that they're going to experience. Because sometimes, you mention it, but it's important to stress enough that they're going to go through that time of adaptation, and it's important to prepare them, not to scare them, but to prepare them that it's going to be a different experience, which is what they're going for anyway. But if I had to do again, this is something that I would spend a lot more time on, preparing my students, because the standards that we have here are totally different than what they have in the target country. So it's really important to prepare your students, not scare them, but prepare them so that when they are there, the culture shock is going to be like a little less, And I think those are the two things that I really like focus on, if I have to do this again.
So as from my experiences, to start simple with fewer things you need to do in the, for example, in the short immersion period in China, and then every year add on something new. And it also depends on the students as well. Yeah.
The only thing I would suggest is I noticed that we tend to think that high school kids will come to us when they need things or they're having issues or problems. So you have to be very proactive, especially when you're in the target country. Ask a lot of questions, detailed questions, specific questions, because sometimes they just don't want to bother you, or they don't know how to go about addressing, especially when it comes to medical issues or emotional issues. They don't know how to express those. And so I think by asking those questions, it gives them an opportunity to check, kind of a check-in with them and I would even recommend on a one-on-one basis, not as a group. And then the last thing, I think if I could go back, and I wish I would have done differently, really spending and allocating time for reflection for these kids to really understand what they're going through. And you really have to kind of implement that time into the program or the broad that you're going to do, where they actually have an opportunity to sit down and think about what they're seeing, what they're doing, because it goes by so fast and so quickly. And by the time they get back from their experience, they've already forgotten so much. So I think either daily or weekly reflection on what they've learned and what they've experienced is like almost like a diary, is so vital and important, I think, in their takeaways from this program or any kind of program.
Thank you, guys. So I think we can all appreciate the challenges that you face planning an international exchange, especially now during COVID time. And we know that travel is very restricted at the moment. So let's transition to what can we do now domestically to provide cultural exchanges for our students, or ways where they can connect authentically using the target language in the circumstances we're in at the moment.
So my students have actually connected more now than any other year, which is really an awesome thing, since the world is kind of closing down a little bit, but my students were still opening so many doors. And it's something that I've actually really reflected on this year, especially doing a presentation like this, a conference like this, hearing my students and other students talk about the importance of relationships. And this is a great chance for us to build relationships before exchange programs can actually physically happen. So my students, for example, we have a German-American virtual exchange, or GAVE. It is an established program, but you don't have to do it that way. If you have a school in mind, start a virtual exchange. It's actually less work on the teacher part in general. My students are learning about culture, and they're learning about different themes that we cover in class anyway through their German partner. And it's the most authentic learning that I've ever done with my students. And they communicate every week with their German partners, and they're getting to establish this relationship. So then when we do have an actual physical exchange program, it's going to be easier to get kids involved and to get kids to really buy into it, and to realize the importance of these physical exchanges, because they'll already have had they've already built a relationship with their German partners. So I'm actually really excited that we can't physically travel right now, because they're building relationships, and that's going to help with programs in the long run. The other thing that I've done a lot of is I have actually had Germans Zoom into my classes. For example, so there's a program called German for Hire through the Goethe Institute, where they help match you up with somebody. But you can do it with anyone. A lot of countries right now are shut down and people are at home, and they want to participate and be part of our students' lives and really help them with authentic learning. So during our career unit, I have a friend who happens to be a butcher, and he Zoomed in and gave my class a tour, and talked to them in German about how he became a butcher. And it was the most authentic learning these kids have ever had. And so it's a great way to do that with Zoom and all these technology opportunities that are available. It's really actually opening doors instead of closing them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, from my experience, I think it's actually an even better opportunity for students to communicate, because we have established the virtual communication sessions every year. So so far right now, we are doing like holiday season communication. We have a topic or theme for each week. So students sign up to do their communication in different days, because we have virtual school days. So yeah, they communicate, and then they learn from the communication facing directly with Chinese students about how to start a conversation, initiate a conversation, how to maintain a conversation, and how to end a conversation. They learned how to do that. So I'm really appreciate, actually, this is an online learning precious opportunity for students.
Okay, what I would say is, what I will add to what you guys said is that you can use, if you're planning to do an exchange program, you can use this time that we had to actually start planning for your program. So, connecting with the school and all that. I have to admit that I haven't done a lot of Zoom with authentic, like with native speakers. But I am using this time to expose my students to authentic resources, and some of them have to do the research themselves, which is also a great tool that you can use. And there's so much technology available that's making it possible for you to access the world, even though you can travel. But this would be a great time for someone who is trying to start a program to start that connection, like connect with the school that you want to work with and plan ahead, so that when we actually are able to travel, you can do it.
Even though you don't have any exchange students, my exchange students, they're still communicating. We have lots of social media, so they can connect each other. But for my other students who don't have any exchange student, what we do is they all have Instagram or TikTok, and they love to watch videos, and what they do is to put comments in French so that they can communicate in one sense. They can share their thoughts, and it's a way to practice, to see the real world, and learning the culture with the French culture.
There's a question in the comments, or should we?
Yes. So the question from Jessica, thank you, is how do you do a virtual exchange?
So the first step to doing the virtual exchange for me was to find a school in Germany. It's actually a different school than where we've been doing our physical exchange in the past. Find a school, get in touch with the instructor, and explain your idea. And my idea was basically for my German 3s for a semester, each week have a certain topic, and have my students actually started off doing it in English so they would feel comfortable. So they talked about themselves. Her students then did theirs in German. And then she just scanned all the documents in and sent it to me. And I did the same thing and sent them to her. And then we had our students exchange numbers on WhatsApp. And because in the second week was then send some pictures of what you do in your free time to your German student. And as the semester progresses, we start doing more in-depth topics. And then we start doing it where my students start doing more in German and her students start doing more in English. So it just know your students, but just do some backwards planning. Our end project, my students are going to do a big poster presentation about their German partner, and that will be all in the target language. And then they're going to do a video montage of the whole experience. So they'll show some screenshots of some of their text messages back and forth. They'll show some things from Snapchat. They'll show some of them have done like FaceTime on WhatsApp with the Germans and their German families. And so they've recorded some of those. So just start with the end in mind. And do it all outside of school. So it's all in their virtual learning or for homework. It's just on top of what you already are doing, but it fits right along with your curriculum. So you just make it work for you.
For my experience, we have a residential school. So it's and also the time between here and China is like 12 to 13 hours, depending on our time. So luckily we have around half an hour in the morning to do the virtual exchange. We can do that every day if we want. So my arrangement for them is 15 minutes in Chinese and 15 minutes in English to exchange, so that, yeah. And before that, we also collaborate with the Chinese teacher in China to settle a topic for Chinese and English. It does not have to be the same topic. It depends on the student's interest, and then set up several questions for each other. So it's a lot of work actually before each virtual session. But it's very interesting. Students learn a lot.
One other thing to consider is, like from my experience, French schools don't have lots of technology like we do. So it was really hard to have a Zoom or even Skype or any other kind of connection virtually. So yes, this is also a thing that you should be thinking of.
Definitely. Thank you, guys. And Jessica or anyone else there in the audience, if you have more questions, feel free to add them at any point. So one of the major components that you guys have mentioned and that the students definitely showed in their video to promote student growth, how do you make sure that students get the most out of their experience, whether this is a virtual exchange or an international exchange? How do you facilitate that self-reflection and that not only growing in the target language and their communication, but also in their cultural competency?
For my experience, I do virtual exchange, for example, right now. I do every day we debrief. So every day right after the virtual exchange, I post my questions to students, including their language growth today, including their cultural get, like what they learn about the culture, and including their conversational skill. So it's mainly about 3 to 4 questions. Based on that, I will help individually with them or collaborate with the Chinese teacher from China to see what we can do for next time. Chinese teacher in China, they do the same thing as I do. So because they have the English session, so they will also ask the students what they learned from today's, like vocabulary or structure or cultural exchange, such as like today we have a student talked about how to cook turkey. So my student said they baked the turkey. So that bake does not make much sense in Chinese culture because they don't have the baking oven. So they about the baking for about 1 or 2 minutes. I think this is learning is really happened.
I mean, what I can add to what you all said is it's important to have like a time where students can reflect on their growth, even if you have to do it in English. And then if you include a component where they have to compare what's happening in the other country and their own country, that also helps them, keep the reflection going. So you can have it, you can pace it like on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, or even on a unit basis. Like you can have something that you do where they have to reflect at the end of the unit, or you can have something that they can do like monthly, and it's not necessarily based on the unit. So what I try to do is, if you can incorporate, to encourage them to do that, depending on the level that you have, you can allow them to do that in English. Because in the end, what you want them to do is to reflect on how well they are growing. So it's important not to stay too focused on them using the target language. That component can be done in English.
Mm-hmm.
I agree completely, Mona. We believe very strongly here at River Bluff in circling up and reflection and debrief. And so for our virtual exchange, we take our chairs and we socially distance in the hallway 6 feet apart, and we share. I just say, what have you and your student talked about, your exchange student talked about since the last time I saw you? What are some cultural differences you noticed? Because what I think might be a cultural difference, they will find something totally different. For example, the big conversation was emojis. People my age, when we use WhatsApp back and forth with my colleagues overseas, they don't use emojis, but apparently German teenagers use a lot more emojis than we do. And so that was something I never would have noticed. So it's important to ask the students what they've noticed instead of just saying, well, this is how Germany is and this is how we are here, because they find a lot of different things. So circling up and debriefing. And then if you do an actual exchange physically, for example, with GAP, with the German exchange program, we're required to meet with our students every day for like 30 minutes. And that's just a chance to debrief as well and talk to your students and make sure that they feel comfortable and that everybody feels safe. And to go over to just make sure everything's going well. So checking in with your students but you've got to have a positive relationship with your students before any of this can happen.
Mm-hmm. Also, it's really important to stimulate their curiosity so that they can explore and they can learn by themselves?
I see a question there. See, asking if we have examples of virtual exchange activities. I do. So I have like videos about the virtual exchange, so I can share with you later on. I don't know how to share. Let me know how to share.
Yes, Sarah, thank you for your question. Actually, both Rebecca and Sarah have been doing some synchronous virtual exchanges. And so I know one of the obstacles is the time difference, obviously. And so that's why Rebecca communicating with students in China, they have one time slot that works for both the Chinese school and with the American school being such a large time gap. And so that's why they're restricted to a very short amount of time. So both Sarah and Rebecca have been doing some synchronous virtual exchanges with their students. So if you have any other follow-up questions on what that looks like, Sarah, feel free to go ahead and ask a follow-up question there as well. We also saw a question about a list of schools for international that do exchanges, and unfortunately, we don't. Most of these are based on personal connections, and currently we don't have one with any Spanish-speaking countries. But if Sarah Buckliew or Rebecca, I believe that's the school that you've been partnering with before. But how do you come about? How do you find schools to do a virtual exchange with?
Oh, it's the same partner school. And how do I get connected with the partner school is started from like several years ago. We are sending students to China as a summer camp, as a scholarship. And the American Council contacted me about they wanted to, there's a Chinese school wanted to have a partnership with any of the American schools, so I responded. So that's why we established initiate a connection, and then I went to China and talked to the principal, and they get to know our school better. So that's why we started.
And for me, we actually have two partner schools.
And talked to.
We have two partner schools. The virtual exchange partner school actually reached out to me. So what I would suggest is get your name out there, let people know who you are, get your program known, brag on yourself, tell your admin about all the awesome things you're doing, tell your community. If you're not part of your local language organizations, be a part of them. Get on Facebook to find your language teacher group, and people will know you, and people are going to reach out to you. So I would definitely get involved as much as you can, and just let people know who you are and how awesome you're doing with your program.
Just another suggestion with seeking schools that you guys would like to do exchanges with. You can do a lot of the work yourself by searching for schools online that interest you, at the locations that you're interested in, especially with the Spanish-speaking countries. There's so many of them to choose from. It's difficult to find some in Spain because of the time difference, like they had mentioned before, but Central America, South America, you can seek online and see if they're equipped for that type of equipment, that Zoom virtual technology. A lot of them will post that on their website in these schools. And as well, you can reach out to the language teachers at those schools and asking them for some kind of exchange. Just usually their emails are posted to online. Most of the exchanges I've done, I created with the help of another organization, and then developed my own. You can do that as well. Find your own schools. You can do the exchange, and you can also do complete immersion. So it depends on what you really want to get out of the program. If your focus is just on learning the language, 3-week immersions or 4-week immersions in the language at a language school, you don't need to seek anyone out for an exchange for that. And it just goes kind of one way, but the students come back and bring the experience with them and share it with other students.
Yeah, and there's always ups and downs. Sometimes some schools connected with us for like 1 year, and then they decided not to do that because maybe doesn't match in some places. Yeah, so it depends on. So we have experienced. This is my third and fourth school. So yeah, so the previous 3 or 4 is already we didn't connect each other anymore. Yeah, so it's some up and downs.
What I'm going to add is that you can literally just have a template email that you look up all the high schools in the country that you want to go to. You look up emails of admin and you send that same email to every single school. I've found schools like that. And the other thing you can do is reach out to the consulate of the country that you want to go to. They always have a consulate in your country where you live, in the state where you live, and or the embassy. And they will have an office that does some reach out, to promote the language and all that. They can always direct you to an organization. One other way that you can do is start with going with an organization that's always set like EF, and then allows you to explore the country. You make your connection, and then you follow up with your own program. You can do that as well.
Yeah, and also choose the schools that has more interesting places to go. Such as my program, we choose the school finally this one largely because this one has a panda base. So yeah, while we were staying in school for immersion, students can also explore in the panda base for the community service in Chinese. So that's really good.
Great. Thank you for all of those suggestions. Lisette, I want to give you an opportunity to go back in case you wanted to share anything about student reflection and how you incorporate that into your exchanges as well.
I've done various things, but I think it's really important to do debriefs with the students as they're experiencing their study abroad. They should be done, if at all possible, daily for them to reflect, and that can be done orally. It can be done written. I've had my students create blogs where they share and write their experience. I've had them do the sharing and reflecting in the target language, depending on their proficiency, or even in their own native language. I think the most important thing is that you create that space, because when you're traveling abroad and you're going from place to place and you're seeing all these museums and you're meeting up with friends and making these new connections, you won't create that space naturally. And especially these young kids, they won't do it on their own. And if you don't actually have them sit down and say, we're going to make time for this, I want to know what you're thinking, I want to know what you're feeling, and have that opportunity to share, I think that really they get much more out of the experience. Another thing that I have my students do when they do exchanges is present the material in a presentational form in the target language, and also even in their own language when they return to the country. That way they're sharing their experiences and reflecting upon it multiple times, as the kids did in this presentation, which I think they did an amazing job. And I think the takeaways that they took from this experience is so meaningful for them because they had those opportunities to reflect during the whole process.
Thanks, Lisette. So Israel, your comment goes right into our next topic, which is some cultural considerations. Obviously, no matter what form cultural exchanges take place, what form it takes, there will be some cultural differences to consider. And a lot of that depends on the target country and your target culture as well. So maybe what are some cultural differences that you did not expect? Obviously, there's some that are expected to happen, but one you had not considered that other people might experience if they do a cultural exchange.
So we last year we all got together with our administrator and we came up with a River Bluff code of conduct kind of thing. Mainly for me, it was mainly with drinking, with alcohol. That's a huge issue in Germany. And so it's incredibly important, I think, if you are doing exchanges in a school that has other teachers doing exchanges, communicate with the other teachers doing the exchanges, communicate with your admin, and get on the same page. It is so important for your administration to have your back. But that's also why it's kind of nice to go through an established program as well. For example, with GAP, the German American Partnership Program. There's a lot that's the teacher does all the planning. The teacher does, does the school and plans all the activities and everything. But they do have some guidelines to help you, and that's another reason why it's important to reach out and learn from other people's mistakes. So talk to other people, find out how they got around certain things, and steal contracts, steal everything. But get on the same page and be totally open with your administrator. And then also, that's why it's so important to be able to talk about your norms and your expectations with your partner school. If your partner school is on the same page as you, then you have that support in both countries, and that's incredibly important. The other cultural differences, Germans like to hang up their laundry, and so it's important that you talk with your American host parents about the cultural differences as well, because they're not sitting in your class every day. They're not knowing, for example, that Germans like to hang up their laundry after they get it out of the washer. So it's important. Your students might know these things, and you might automatically assume that the adults would know these things as well, but they really don't. Lots of times the adults, the parents, are less informed than your high school students that are hearing you every day. So have parent meetings. I have a culture handbook that I give the parents, and I say, these are some cultural differences, and let's talk it out. Let's talk about why there are cultural differences. So I actually hold classes for the American parents that are going to host, because you've got to get them on board. You have to have them be your biggest support system as well. So just little tiny things that you wouldn't even think about. If you have any questions at all, German related, email me, because I have a whole list of cultural differences that I would love to share. Every time I go overseas, and every time Germans come here, I always find a new cultural difference.
Yeah, and I think that the more you prep them for the experience, they'll still have the cultural shock that you can't take away. I mean, they will still not, it won't sink in those differences. But the more you educate them ahead of time, the less of a blow it is for them when they arrive. And and sometimes you can say it over and over again, and they have to actually experience to really understand it, that it's real, those differences.
For Chinese immersion program, the school we go is a residential school. So students and teachers are always together. So there isn't much of that to worry about. But there are two things that I told my students to be really careful. One is to not to comment too much on political issues in China, and also be very careful of making friends, especially boys with boy and girlfriend relationship, because that is considered to be not very good in China. So this is, other than these two things, other things are okay, especially food. Food is great, yeah, but it's still, there's a cultural difference for American Chinese food, Chinese American food, and Chinese food. So students needs to be very brave to try different food in China. That's another difference.
What I would say is that just keep in mind that just go with the idea that they don't know anything, because if they do know, all you are doing is repeating what they already know. Mm-hmm. Just assume that they don't know anything, and go over every single cultural differences that they might have to deal with the parent, but also with the student. And because that is for us, for instance, just like in Germany, the drinking age is different. So that's something that you need to emphasize, to parents and all that, and students. And also certain habits, like how many showers you take a day. I mean, these are like little things that you might not think about, but go over every single thing. Like go over the day, the span of a day. What are things that people would do in the target country compared to what people would do in the span of a day in here? So don't assume that anything is understood. Just go over everything. That's what I would do. There's things that we assume, like even remember that some of those kids have never traveled outside the country. Even how to pack. Like if I have to do this again, I'll go over what you need to have in your carry-on just in case you lose your luggage, so that if something happened the first 2 days, you have something to So really think about every single detail And I think the more, this is a case where more is better.
And as an example of hosting an exchange student here in the States, what I tell my student is that they are representing their country, their school, like American teenagers, because French, we have a stereotype of American student, American food, American family, American life. So they're here to learn about American culture, but they should be, the American student should be that the representative of their country, their culture.
Yeah, agreed.
One of the things that y'all mentioned was that more is better, right? Explain as much as you can ahead of time, but at the same time, like Sarah, you said you add to your list each year, and some things you hadn't. Mona, if you did this again, I would do this instead. So I would encourage all of you listening as well is to address the cultural differences as they occur as well, because there's no way you're going to pinpoint every single thing the students are going to encounter or the parents are going to encounter. And there's no way that they can retain all that. So sometimes you learn through experience as well. We have just a little bit more time left. So audience, if you have any more questions, please type them in the comments. I also, panelists, do you have anything else to say before we go to our final word?
One thing to add, and you kind of touched on this, so there's no way that you can plan for everything. So once again, just I want to reemphasize, reach out to people in your own language or people who have had exchanges before and learn from them, learn from their mistakes, but then also cut yourself some slack. It's not going to be perfect. But as you saw from the videos, and not every kid's going to get everything out of it that you want them to, but as you saw from the videos and from the testimonies, you are going to reach a lot of students, and they are going to really be a changed person when they come back, even if you have bumps in the roads. And that's what makes it all worth it. So cut yourself some slack. It's hard work. It's worth it though. And it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be perfect for a couple of kids. And those are the kids that are going to take this experience and it's going to change their life.
Thanks, Sarah. John Samples has a question. Can you share some of the experiences you organize for visiting students from other countries when they come to the States?
You want me to hop right back in?
Sure.
Okay, I'll be real fast on this one. So with the German-American Partnership Program, you are required to do some field experiences. And the ones that have worked best for me is to do like a low ropes team building experience where, or some kind of team building activity where German students from your target country and from here have to work together as a team to overcome obstacles. And then the other one that really worked really well for us was something very simple. It's called the Potato Chip Challenge, where we went and bought the weirdest flavored potato chips we could find. And then like the German students sat in one row and the American students sat across for them. And then the American students like fed their German a potato chip, and then they had to guess what flavor it was, and then vice versa. And so it's like a competition. So just like simple little things that does not cost a lot of money. It didn't take a lot of time, but it was something that these students talked about for a long time afterwards. So it doesn't have to be anything expensive or doesn't have to be anything that you even have to leave school necessarily for. Just little tiny things like that are a really great way to get these students to form bonds.
Mm-hmm. So my experience is, besides living with the American family here, so they'll be doing the everyday activities, everyday routines with American families, but with the students here at school, we're trying to do field trips in South Carolina. We have lots of historic sites. So the first week when they come, we're trying to explain where they are, who we are, etc. And the second week, mostly we're showing them the American school culture, the sports, the cheerleading, the school cafeteria, what kind of they're doing, what they play outside of the school, etc. So really to be immersed in American culture, we're trying to think the basics of what the American students here are doing every day.
One thing you can do, depending when people are coming here, if they're coming in the summer, in the spring, you can make a list of activities that are available during that season. And you can even get your student to share with you some activities that would be interesting for your student to do. We've done that. And you would be amazed sometimes the little thing that you do are the one that they have the most fun with. For instance, when we had the student here, we did the Secret Valentine. That was a huge hit. And that was something that we came up with last minute. And it was better than some of the activities that we planned, for months and all that. So get input of students, because as an adult, you might not think of certain things. So get your student to make a list of activities that are available in your city and in your state, and then you can kind of look at that and decide what you want to do.
Thank you. So as our final word to wrap up, we've heard from students about the impact that these learning experiences have had on them. So as we conclude today, we'd like to hear from the educator's perspective. As your final word, what impact has leading these learning experiences had on you, either professionally or personally, or both?
I have become a much better educator going through these programs because now I'm designing my curriculum with intent and with purpose. And that purpose is for our students, like you saw at the beginning with the introduction, to get our students to become global leaders and better citizens. And that for me is my ultimate goal. They're going to make mistakes in the target language. They're going to struggle sometimes, but if they realize that there is more to the world out there, that's my ultimate goal. And to let them be owners of their own learning is huge. And these exchanges, virtual, real, physical exchanges, or just bringing Germans or any other language, bringing them into your classroom via Zoom, letting them see that there's so much out there, has opened so many doors. And then the other thing for me personally, so that's professionally, for me personally, I have become like a mom to these kids. They call me Mama Frau. And these students that really take things out of these programs, they become incredibly dear to me. And it's just really neat to see them do something with the language, and you realize how much of an impact you've really had on these kids. And that's really, that's why we teach, and that's why we're here. And so to see that and to hear them give these testimonies, really means a lot. Please contact me, especially if you're a German teacher, sbucklew@lexington1.net, or follow me on Twitter.
For me, I would really sincerely want to thank for my wonderful team and my leaders and principals. Without your help, the Chinese program cannot grow this much. We are right now have Chinese 1 to AP, and also the immersion experience with the partner school in China. So from doing all this, I believe I become a better bridge in between two cultures. Yeah, and I'm really fulfilled. Thank you.
Okay, what I would say that in the end, as a language teacher, I'm trying to teach my students to be compassionate human beings. In the end, that's the goal of learning the language, because when you're learning the language, you learn another culture. So getting to do these programs really gives your student the opportunity to not only explore other culture, but also to better appreciate their own culture as well. So it's really rewarding to see your students, even the ones that struggle at the end, some of them to change completely their plans about what they want to do just because of one trip. And they eventually, even when they go through hardships during the trip and all that, eventually we haven't had one single student who hadn't recognized how fortunate they were to be part of a program like that. So I will encourage you, no matter how hard it is, in the end, it's well worth it.
I think for me personally, a lot like Miss Bucklew, is that just the relationships you build, how you see the student grow. Since I've been doing the program for over 17 years, I see how it impacts the student, how it changes their lives, how it makes them global citizens of this world, and how they continue with the language even long after they have finished the program and graduated high school, graduated college, and are in a profession where they're utilizing these skills. And so for me, I think it's how I feel like I can change the world in a very small way, one student at a time and one life at a time. And so for me, that's professionally and personally.
Yes, and I do believe that the life is all about relationship. These days, the global relationship is very easy because of social media and every technology that we have. And really, having an exchange or even visiting a country is once in a lifetime opportunity for the student, high school students. So having that kind of opportunity build the character of the student, not only learning the language, but being a global citizen, and they're gonna build their life asset.
Thank you all so much for being panelists and for sharing your expertise. And if you have any other additional questions, we have to sign off now, so you can contact us. We can get you our contact information. And thank you, Global C.R.E.D, for this opportunity to share in this platform. So thank you all.
Thank you.